15 minutes.
Oh,
And then
okay, all right.
I don't know why it does that, but we're back live again.
We're back live, okay. When Willard was out of the Civil War, he wanted to find a way to make some money. He was married at the time. And so what he did was he went and bought yards and yards and yards of fabric. And his idea was to make, I envisioned it like a big scroll. And he was doing scenes of the Civil War. And then whoever was working the scenery would like crank it so that the next scene would come up, and he would have speakers who would talk about what was going on in the paintings. Well, it was a big flop because nobody wanted to talk about the war. They had been through 4 years of it. They wanted to get on with their lives. And so he took it and he said, well, I guess, nobody wants to see this, and we spent all this money on this fabric, so he washed it all out, dried it, folded it up, and then used it for other projects.
Oh, no.
Yes. And I don't know how long it took him to do that, but anyway.
Oh, that's too bad.
It. So, I was trying to, this is not in real good condition, but the reason why we have this here is because this particular print was given to us by Hugh Mosier's great-great-great-granddaughter, who I know very well. She's a good friend of mine. And she donated it to the museum, and she also has Mosier's original fife that he used to model in the painting. So we think maybe she'll want to give it to us someday. Right now, it's she was a teacher, and she said she would like to go to schools and talk about the fife and Hugh Mosier and the painting and all of that. So that's pretty exciting. But so
Very
Willard, his paintings got better, I think. If you look at some of them, this is a painting of Dan Patch, which was a famous racehorse in the time that it was painted, harness racer. And you can see how it kind of sort of primitive. But then you look at this, and this is a watercolor, and this is actually Mr. Willard. He liked to paint himself in a lot of his paintings, and I think this is so different. He did go to art school for a year in New York and studied, and I think you can almost tell the before and after paintings just from the looks of them. He did a lot of landscapes. He traveled out west at one time, did a lot of western landscapes. I tend to like I like his watercolors a lot. I think those are very pretty.
Is that Lake Erie? Or?
Yes. This is Lake Erie. This is up in Lorraine.
Okay.
So these are just a few. This is the one he did when he was in art school. It's called The Roman Prisoner. And you can see how fine it is with the muscle showing and the wrinkles and the cloth, and far different from some of his early paintings that he did.
And if you're back at a distance, you can't see the chains, but
yes,
you come a little closer.
Yeah, there's chains, and it goes down here, and the links. He did a very nice job with those. Now, I was telling you about Chroma Lithographs. So if you'd like to, this is a pluck that we have had, and this is a Chroma Lithograph. And you can see how very dark it is because of the aging. Almost looks like it's cracked. This can't be cleaned because it'll ruin it. And then this is a very, very early pluck that it almost looks like it's something that Willard did on his sketch pad. And a great, I want to say nephew of his, Willard Gordon, came to see us one time, and he says, oh, you need to have a pluck, because it was before we had the other plucks there, and so he sent it to us. We were very thrilled that he was so generous, and he also sent the portraits of Willard's mom and dad.
How about that?
Yeah. He painted furniture for the Couch Furniture Company, which was here in Wellington also, and this is a set that you see that he has his nature vignettes painted on them, all of the furniture matching, and he has painted on all of them. And it has been donated to us.
I've seen furniture with paintings on them before and never given it any thought.
Somebody had to do it.
Yeah, right. And who knows, maybe what I saw was something
Could
from
have
Archibald Willard.
Might have
You
been.
never know.
Yes, from the antique things. Nowadays, of course, they have decals and they put on.
Yeah.
And people don't have so much on their furniture as they do other things. But so this is part of Willard. You probably would like to see. Okay, this is Reverend and Mrs. Willard here, and these are portraits that Archibald painted and that were sent to us again by Willard Gordon. And the Reverend Samuel Willard preached here in Wellington at the Christ Community Church, and that church still stands today, but just in 2020 it closed. They had a very small congregation. Their pastor passed away from COVID, unfortunately,
Oh dear.
and they just couldn't get it together, and so they closed the doors to it. But it had survived all of this time. And then Mrs. Willard. So,
She definitely has that mid-1800s look.
yes, she does.
Very stern with the spectacles.
Yes, very much so. So if you, did you have any more questions down here?
No, we can...
Well, if you'd like to go upstairs, I'll
Sure.
show you the other mural that's upstairs.
Let's go check it out.
All right. We have 3 floors and a mezzanine, so I will let you go up.
Alrighty.
And on your right, you will see a wonderful portrait of Hugh Mosier, which looks like a photograph, but it's actually a pencil sketch.
It does look like a photograph
It
from
does.
the period.
And here's a photograph of him, and then this is my, this is my grandfather, great-grandfather, and it was his father that posed for the central figure. But they were part of the Fife and Drum Corps, and they were good buddies. So, that's, I walked past that a bunch of times and didn't realize it was my relative. But, and these are a lot of portraits of famous Wellington people or people that had an impact. This gentleman, Mr. Wadsworth, was a funeral director, and he was also part of a slave rescue here in Wellington.
Oh, really? There are Wadsworths in Connecticut. And I'll just about bet you that they're somehow related.
Probably, I would think so. A lot of people from Wellington, if you go back, came from the New England area.
Oh, one thing I
And then
noticed, I moved here from Connecticut 4 years ago, and everywhere I go, I see street names, road names that are named after towns in Connecticut.
Yes, yes. This house, we call it the Houck House, and he was one of the first settlers of Wellington, and this house still exists today, and it looks pretty much like that. And Willard painted scenes underneath the windows, and they still exist.
How about that?
Yeah, after all the people that have been through it and remodeled it and whatnot. But I think that's neat that they kind of tried to leave it as much as they could the way it was originally.
They should be commended for that. So many
Yes.
people just paint right over it
Right.
and not give it any thought. They don't care about this historical significance.
Yes, that's heresy in Wellington.
It
This
is.
is Mr. Warner that I was telling you about that built the house that's now the funeral home and that had the privy that I was telling you about. I think he looks very distinguished. Quite the guy. And we have Mr. Robinson, who had the barbershop here in town, and it is still a barbershop today. It's gone through a few owners, but it still is in existence today, which I think is pretty cool. And Chief Furkren, he has since passed away, but he was a very, very nice gentleman. Really fine man. And
That's too
Mrs.
bad.
Rucker, she was a home ec teacher here in town.
So there's more here in Spirit of 76 Museum than just Archibald Willard.
Oh yes, just you wait. And Miss Edith Robinson, I'll tell you about Mr. Herrick, but he donated the money for the library, and she became the librarian and was one of the longest serving librarians that we've had here in Wellington.
Wow.
Very cool.
And Joseph was a relative of hers?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
He was a Civil War soldier, and we had found out that they were in Kentucky, and he was killed. He was shot because of his color.
Oh no.
Made it through the Civil War. Actually, and I have to look into this more, he was in the same, he was in the 103rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Company F, and so was my great-grandfather. And so it must have been a desegregated unit, and they were in Kentucky, and he made it through some of the war, and then was killed because of racism.
That's
very sad.
It's sad, and it's kind of, I don't know, oxymoronic, I guess you could say, because we fought the Civil War in order to free the blacks from slavery, and then they turn around and are, oppressed and persecuted
Yes.
because of their skin color.
Yes, yes, yes.
Gee
Hopefully
whiz.
we're getting better.
I think we are. We've made tremendous progress in the
Yes.
last 100 years.
Yes. And we come across Mr. Herrick, who was quite a man. I can't even go into everything that he did. We'd be here another hour probably, but he grew up, went to Cleveland to live, became a banker, and then he got into politics. He knew presidents. He was a friend of President Taft. And he was in Paris. He was an ambassador to Paris, and he was there when Lindbergh landed. And you can see this picture. That's Mr. Herrick. That's Lindbergh who landed, and there's another picture over there also of him. He was very different kind of ambassador, and he would have these parties, and he would invite common people, and he would invite the important people and the politicians and all different kinds of people. And at first the French were very offended by that, because really an ambassador should only have very important people at their soirees. Well, then it turned out that they thought his parties were the best parties of all, because they had a mix of people and they were a lot of fun. But he was just beloved by the French people. He was there when World War I broke out, and the countries that were declaring war against each other, their embassies were taking their keys. They locked up their embassies, took their keys to Mr. Herrick and said, "Please protect our embassies for us." So the story goes that Mr. Herrick had posters made up that said, "If you break into this embassy, you are declaring war against the United States," which of course nobody wanted to be responsible for. And when the war was all over, the embassies had not been broken into. Herrick gave them back their keys, and they went in and we got back to business.
Great.
The other thing that was really cool was that he took over a school that had been deserted because of the war, and he called in some of his favors and private people and got doctors and nurses and started the American hospital. And all of the soldiers, no matter what side they were on, wanted to be treated at the American hospital because they knew that they would get well and they knew that they would be treated well. So anyway, he was so beloved in Paris that they have a Herrick Avenue in Paris. And one of our board members went to Paris and found it and took a picture of the street sign. Very cool. And they had just he was in Europe when he passed away, and they had quite a parade and funeral for him there, and then they brought him here as his ship went past, the British ship. They gave him a 21-gun salute, and then he is buried in Cleveland at the cemetery there. So that's Mr. Herrick, who is very fine gentleman. And as I said, we have a Herrick Memorial Library. He dedicated it to his parents. He left them, he got it built. Well, he told the people that he would pay for a library, and they dithered around for about 3 years trying to decide where to put it. So finally he came in and he said, "Well, put it there. Take down that building and put up the library." And I'll show you what the building is that he had torn down when we get upstairs.
All right.
Okay. After you.